Hello, hello. You got me now? Okay, good deal. Maybe it's better if it's off, I don't know. But can you guys hear me okay? Up here, it doesn't sound like it's on at all. They're saying turn it up. Okay. So Bob Allen over there, he's been such a friend to the industry. He's always a great sponsor, but more importantly than that, he's really a go-to guy when there's a question coming up. Just instrumental in every aspect, helped us with our contracts, a lot of pro bono work for us. So I'd like to give him a round of applause because he's always you know, I wasn't really sure where this discussion would go, and I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and I've been on the ethics committee for quite a while, and then got off of it for a while. And one of the reasons I got off of it probably 10 or so years ago, it was too busy. And it was a busy committee. The violations weren't, or the alleged violations were generally not very stringent ones, but there was a lot. And I've been the ethics chair now for only 6 months, I guess. We've not had one case. And so I'd like to, I'm just going to say this real quickly and then we'll get into our discussion. But I think as a group we should probably change our narrative because our clients and the rest of the world sees us by what we say about ourselves, right? A lot of us that have been in business a long time, and Doug way longer than I, and people around the room are a lot more experienced than I am as well. You always looked at the industry as being somewhat, as 20 years ago, 10 years ago, as a little bit of a loose cannon, used car world. And that's the way we talked about ourselves. We would say things like, oh, he's one of the good guys. Like there's just a few. And what I'm finding out, getting to know everybody on the East Coast, the West Coast, you know, the Panhandle, New England with the Yacht members, the guys that aren't the good guys are the outliers now, and they're isolated. You know, they're isolated because people don't want to do business with them, and that's the new norm. Is the industry's very professional, and I think we should all be very proud to be in this industry. And so the next time a client asks you, wait, is that guy a good guy? You know, remember that when you're giving the answer, because how we view ourselves is how we portray ourselves. So there's not one bad guy in this room. You guys are the cream of the crop. You're at a seminar, you're learning, we're talking, we're discussing, we're talking today about nuances. We're not talking about really right from wrong, right? So just keep that in mind as we go forward, is that we work with a highly ethical group of guys. We're always talking about disclosure issues. We're talking about all these things. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll off my soapbox for the rest of the time up here. Professor Karcher. So as we go, you guys weren't introduced, but what we'll do, just give me a two-line scenario of your background and what you're doing, and then I'll ask my question. I'll go ahead and let you get started.
I'm Michael Karcher. I am yet another maritime lawyer working for Robert Allen Law. I primarily work at the litigation side. I sometimes kid Bob that he has the happy clients who buy boats and sell boats, and I talk to the ones where they may not be as happy. And I also teach at the University of Miami at the School of Law, which is why he calls me professor, but that's only until 9:30 in the morning. So now I'm just a lawyer.
Nice. Also a great friend of the industry, and he was my instructor for the International Yacht Arbitration Council that was set up, and we've yet to have a first case. So that's really exciting that, you know, everybody's doing the right things so far. Mike, I just wanted to start with you because I'd like to get, you know, it seems kind of goofy to talk about ethics when we don't. How do you define ethics?
Well, ethics is usually, if you want to reach deep, it comes from the Greek word ethos, which is a way of living. And it's essentially, you know, that rational justification for our moral judgments. You know, it's a study of, you know, what's morally right and wrong. It was quoted at the last seminar. Chief Justice Earl Warren from the Supreme Court said, in a civilized life, the law floats in a sea of ethics. And I think it's more than that. It's your integrity, your character. I can go from quoting the Supreme Court to reading a meme or a wall poster where it says, you know, integrity or character is what you do when no one is watching. But I think there's a lot of truth in that. And it is that how we deal with each other, how we deal with our customers, not just within the boundaries of the law, and we can talk about what laws apply or what codes, but it's what you do morally within the, above the law may set a floor, but this is more what's above that.
So I remember I took a concealed carry permit. I don't carry, by the way. But I took the class. Well, maybe I don't. And I remember the one takeaway from that class was just because you can doesn't mean you should. And how does the ethics of your life and your business practices relate to the law? Is everything ethical, legal? Is everything legal, ethical?
No. In fact, there are many things which were considered legal. You go through history. Slavery at one time was legal if you want to go all the way to one end. Segregation at one time was legal. It may not be morally justified, it may not be ethical, but there were legal floors that were set. And that is legal sometimes changes with the legislature or the law and such. But that your ethics, your moral judgments, I think are deeper than that. And then the laws that we kind of look to, they have the Florida Yacht and Shipbrokers Act, Federal Statute 326. We have the Florida Administrative Code, Chapter 61B60, which sets forth our licenses and how this works. The IYBA has its bylaws. There are also Florida statutes, about, we're going all the way to the other side to, receiving commercial bribes. So there are, certainly floors that are set. But I think the ethics are more on how we deal with each other and how we deal with our customers, if that makes sense.
It does. Shane, yes. You two would borrow first before I throw you under the bus.
Tampa Yacht Sales. I've been at this for 20 years. Started with MarineMax, worked with Galati, and jumped off on my own, and rest is history. Just been working, doing the same old thing, helping people buy and sell boats.
And I'm going to throw you under the bus with a question you don't know coming your way, but how does the day-to-day ethics drive your business from how you deal with your clients? And then we'll get into some disclosure issues.
I mean, it's a baseline of, I find that the way we run our business is we're trying to give the customers the best experience of, you're buying a used boat, here's what we know about the history, here's what we know about the deferred maintenance. Give them an honest chance of having fun at boating. I mean, it goes back to when I was at MarineMax. Hey, we're delivering the boating dream. They have a huge network, all the people, trying to keep the boats running. It can be a shit show, right? And some people buy a boat, they have no idea what they're doing. I mean, they literally don't know what risers, manifolds, you're trying to educate them, whether it's an 88-foot yacht or a 24-foot runabout. There's a cost of operation, just like starting a business. We're trying to give them a chance of success, and the ethics of telling them what they're getting is, I just think it's paramount in what we do.
The thin line to walk between.
You're trying to sell a boat, I get it, but if there's something broken, either have the seller fix it or tell the guy, hey, it's not working.
You got
and just because a surveyor doesn't find it doesn't mean, oh, we got by with that one, That's how all of our brokers and, that's.
Jimmy, I'm going to go to you now. You're two-road borrow, and I'm going to ask you that same question, then we'll get to some more meat of the things here.
Yeah, Jimmy Rogers. I've been in the business for 14 years. Started at MarineMax in Naples with James back in 08. Started Tom George Yacht Group with Tom, my uncle, back in 09. And recently became acquired by the growing OneWater marine machine and formulated the new OneWater Yacht Group, which is currently growing and expanding, which is wonderful. It's been a great ride. That's kind of where we are today. So it's wonderful. It's a good place.
So same question, how do you guys, is it pretty much the same from the standpoint of disclosure issues, but when it comes to guiding, just walk through the process real quickly on how your day-to-day ethics guides you with a client?
Sure. You take everything away, all the details, the people you're dealing with, and take it down to its core and say, is this right? Is this wrong? Am I going to do something that's going to compromise integrity in this situation? Am I getting away with sleight of hand? Am I doing something that's untruthful? And you look at it and go, is it really worth it? Like, why would you want to do something like that? I like to sleep at night. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, and you look at these situations and scenarios, and you learn over time. Everybody makes mistakes. That's okay. You grow and learn. But at the end of the day, your obligation is to your client. And if you put that first and make sure that they're happy and they're being well taken care of and they're getting the right information so they can make their own informed decision, that's that's the guiding line. That should be the basis of everything, not can I extract the most profit or the most money out of something.
That's a good point, because we've all been in a situation, if you sell boats long enough, that you go back at the end of the day and you're looking back at, if you reflect on what you do, hopefully everybody does, and you say, yeah, I probably wouldn't do that again that way, and that's the way we learn and grow and, and change things. Andy?
Andy Miles, Miles Yacht Group in Jupiter, and I'm house shopping over here. You never can tell.
Well, you're already my neighbor at the office, so.
I know, and I use you for several things you don't even know.
So that's why we go through so much copy paper, right?
And coffee. But anyway, I've been in the business since 1992. Actually, this is my 30th year. And I started out with Bassett Boat Company selling Sea Rays and moved on to, that became Marine Max, and I left Marine Max and went to HMY and went to Westport in 06 and left there 3 years ago and started my own company at the Jupiter Yacht Club. And it's been going quite well. But yeah.
If you walk by Andy's office, you'll see these big mega yacht build sheets laying on this. I don't know if he really does it or he just acts like he does. But he's got these sheets he's laying out there. It's very exciting. So I just haven't go let me come inside. So back to you, Mike. My first question is kind of in between ethics and legal, so you'll have to guide the answer. We're going to talk about the word disclosure, and full disclosure is required by law. What is required in disclosure? And this is a two-part question. The secondly, what is the definition of material when it comes to disclosure?
Well, I'll do this backwards. What is material could keep a room full of lawyers employed for a long time. It is more sometimes in the eye of the customer. Now, right now, most of the legal cases are going to the end of material for, I'll start at one end, where it seems to be happening more, less for brokers and more for insurance companies, where a lot of these definitions are coming from. If your customer, and this is, I'm getting on my soapbox for a second, but if your customer is buying a boat and he's getting insurance, he needs to disclose everything that possibly could influence an underwriter to make a decision, in which case loss history becomes a big thing. That also overlaps into the broker's world, because customers want to know the loss history. And if you, as a seller, or representing a seller, know certain things about it and it is not disclosed to a buyer, it can come back to haunt you. I know everyone's aware of the case a couple of years ago where they could go to something definite, the type of hull, how big it was, how size and such. But even going farther back, there are cases involving where a broker knew that a boat had sunk, and they didn't disclose it because, well, it was fixed and it's probably okay. But if your customer wants to know that, and he probably does, and you don't disclose it, it can come back to haunt you as the seller. And as a matter of law, it's either misrepresentation or violating or implied warranty for fitness, and that can come back to haunt you. So what is material is kind of a floating line, but it's more in terms of in terms of what the customer thinks. I'm a big believer disclose everything. I mean, disclose, yes, there was, especially with loss history, something happened to his boat, but it was fixed, and here's what happened and such, because you don't want to get caught into that. That you're just, if you know something and you don't, you could be buying a lawsuit.
So the obvious things, like when a boat's sunk, I mean, I think we all agree that that's something we have to disclose, right? But we always talk about gray areas. Shane, if a guy has run his boat aground, and he's got the props fixed, and maybe he didn't even bend the rudders or the shafts, is that something you have to disclose, you think?
I think at any point you have a grounding that's known. I mean, I just listed a 420 sedan bridge, and the guy sends me pictures of his diver, and he's got a corner of the prop is all twinged. I'm like, wow, maybe we're gonna get it fixed. It's gonna come up. I said, "Did you run aground?" He's like, "No." I mean, so at what point can you say, "I know everything about everything and does the owner know everything about it? If we can find out something, hey, there was an insurance claim, like I pay for boat history report to be on it. I get it's not perfect, but let's give the buyer the best opportunity to be successful and know what he's buying. I mean, that's what I drive into all my brokers is, let's find out. Ask the freaking questions. Know about what's going on the boat. If you can't ask the questions of the deferred maintenance and what we're selling, you shouldn't be listing the boat. I mean, I think that's where the ethics of, I don't know, a hose count popped off and we have water in the bilge. Am I going to be able to find that out? I'd say at some point, there's been leaks in every boat, and, you know, I think material, like you said, it's a floating line. Do the best job you can.
Andy, what do you think?
Well, I wanted to ask you because I'm in the middle of a sale right now, and
Free legal advice.
free legal advice, but we received as part of the conditional acceptance from the selling agent's attorney quite an onerous list, and one of the things in there is, if you're talking about a 20-year-old boat, we only know the past 2 or 3 years. That the owner, it could have been struck by lightning. Those could have been events that happened 15 years ago, right? I mean, I had 3 boats, and I've run aground all over South Florida. I mean, I know the bottom everywhere, right? But the reality is, did you do something that is damning to the vessel structure, or?
Right.
But the reality is, how do you handle? You're representing a seller or a buyer, and the 2 brokers, we want to be upfront about everything, but we don't know what happened 10, 15 years ago. And, one of my fears, because I caution my owner or buyer to stay away from that verbiage, because we only know what happened during these few years. And you don't want to sell a boat and find out, oh yeah, that's X so-and-so boat, and that was, on the rocks over in the Bahamas. But how do you suggest that is handled?
You need to show that you've made some sort of reasonable inquiry to your seller. Because sometimes they say, who's the most important person in the room? We're talking about ethics, but at the end of the day, who's the most important person in the room? Well, you are. So you want to make sure you're covered. And so sometimes I think if you have made a reasonable inquiry, sometimes it's good to have a sheet going to your seller, almost like an insurance agent's loss history. What's the loss history? This is what he put down, and this is what you learned of. If it's there, you know it. If it's not there, that helps protect you. So, but I do think you need to make a reasonable inquiry. The reason I keep coming back to the insurance, because sometimes I think it's close to my heart, is there seems to be a wave now of insurance denial of coverage claims for loss history. And there, a misrepresentation, knowing or unknowing, can cause a denial of coverage. Having said that, that type of legal standard, I don't know if it's drifting over, but that's what people are beginning to look at. And if a judge is looking at it and said, well, for insurance is this, so why not for the broker? So make some sort of reasonable inquiry into what is the loss history of the boat, if anything, to cover your own skirts.
That's a great question. Does anybody in here have a form that they have filled out for that, other than the typical IYBA says, hey, there's no known disclosures? I mean, I've never...
When we get to the Q&A, we'll ask that.
Yeah.
So I was surprised, Mike, that there actually is no statute in Florida law requiring a disclosure. And the thing I want to make clear, and if you can add clarity to that, just because there's no statute doesn't mean you're not going to get in trouble for that.
And this is where you come back to, well, a little bit coming back to ethics, but also under, you as a broker, you have a fiduciary duty to your customer to take care of him, to look out for his interests. And if you know things about the boat and you're not telling him, you are violating that fiduciary duty you have to your customer. And so that's where it comes. It's more of a common law issue and such. But also, if there's a misrepresentation, it could be, you could be, sued for, a violation of an implied warranty of fitness. The seller is warranting that this boat is fit for what, he is intending to buy it for. Now we can get into the fact that, yes, we'll put in our purchase and sale agreements the houses, roles, and the warranties and such. But if you know something and you're not telling him, that kind of shifts it over.
So it brings a great question. Let's say you sell a boat and you know that, hey, one engineer's rebuilt and the other one's not far behind it, you've said it verbally. If I don't write it and it's not something that's written into conditional acceptance, you're saying the guy can come back, oh, well, the engine blew up, this thing was fit for survey, surveyed out, but where's the line go?
If he's got a survey, now we're, more talking, the facts and, whose evidence is, bigger, but, if there are surveys, to a certain point, and that's part of the things in some of the purchase and sale agreements, the idea is, he's not 100% relying on you. You can also say he's got his survey and he had this found out. And these things, he took his steps. But again, if it's some, knowledge, as a young lawyer, I was involved with the case way early on, and I think only, I look around and see who's got the most gray hair and such, who was involved in cases back then, where there are issues of who knew what, and the claims came, some of the brokers knew or surveyors knew, but no, we're not sure if it's material, we don't know if it's important, or I just heard a rumor, until they found out a boat had sunk. And everyone kind of knew, but no, it's not material. And, judge went after some of it.
What part of it wasn't material? The fact that it was on the bottom, or the fact that
So, we heard a rumor and such. It has to be on the bottom. I think it's well past what I think we refer to as the statute of remembrance. It happened a long time ago. But, those are the kind of claims where someone comes back and says, this person knew. And we saw his phone records and things like that, where there are calls going back to the mechanics. I like the idea of having almost like, the insurance agents have a sheet, when they'll send it, loss history, what have you done before, whatever. In mandatory with the sellers, the same thing. What is the loss history of your boat, and such things. And the repairs, hey, it's, if you know what you know.
And never underestimate the value of memorializing these types of things in an email. Just, because those records are very valuable, that you save something in print to the client, and disclosure, it's very important. The people that we deal with, these men and women run companies, they're used to things going wrong, and I think as salespeople, naturally you're a little scared to bring up, oh man, I found this out, or this is, but if you're constantly preparing, I always have the discussion, ma'am, sir, you're just this side of racing cars. This is a bleed. Because if you start wondering about all the dollars, you want to make sure whoever your captain is or whoever's involved in your management, and they're not taking advantage of your money. They're doing the right thing by you, but it is a very expensive hobby to get into. And that's the first thing, because I think a lot of salesmen are scared of unearthing this is the cost of it, right? So
that's a good point. Hard truths are difficult to do sometimes, and it's the worst thing ever. You get the guy excited about the boat, you go see it, you spend a lot of time, maybe look at it twice, go on a sea trial, and then you come upon some information that the captain said, oh yeah, I remember like last year when it ran aground and got struck by lightning. You're like, I'm just hearing this now? Like,
the old captain was packed in a bag of ice, dead in the cruise.
It's like, stuff comes out right out to the Bahamas. Well, I didn't know that.
So it's hard choice.
But yes, I have learned over the years, if you have bad news, you have something that's just not comfortable, bring it up right away in the very first thing, right after hello, how's your day? Hey, you know what, there's a dead guy in the crew stateroom, I just found out about it. But get it out there, and then the two of you, the whole process is communication.
Yep.
But the two of you talk it through, and then they will be so much more happy with you and so much more trusting of you if they know you're one of these people that just brings it up and deals with it, and then, and also it's guiding. I always, a yacht transaction to me is looking down the road to the end, which is the closing. Or where is all this taking us? Everything that we're doing right now, don't get too focused in the weeds of where are we headed with all this, and try to bunch it all into this one package, the good, the bad, memorialize the things that you feel like, could be an issue down the road. every transaction I do is pretty lawyered up, so I always have to think about, okay, I want to keep my guy out of trouble. I want to make sure my group is doing the right thing, but ethically, I think if you're just running ahead of every problem, you see what, because we have to get rid of everything that's going wrong, right? Basically, we have to have the cure, because the transaction will have stumbles down the road. So you want to be ahead of it, addressing it, and it's always better to say, hey, I found this thing that's not really right, and take it back to your owner, but this is what I've done to solve it, if you can. And then they're so much more happy with you if you're just totally open with the whole process.
In regarding memorializing, as you put it, which is a great idea, Bob, Bob Allen stepped out, but one of the things he did really well with his group of guys on our acceptance of vessel, it says, and you brought this up a minute ago, and that's why I'm commenting on it, it says, the client and the purchaser, or the buyer, is not relying on any verbal statements by brokers or the buyer, or the seller, excuse me. But if that verbal statement is a disclosure, that's when you want to put it in writing, right? Because you say, well, nobody told me. Well, now you can't prove you told them. So everything that's a disclosure issue, it could be a phone call, you're telling the guy, but you follow up with an email just to restate what we talked about, that kind of thing. So those are important things. A lot of times, with different brokers, you get involved after the fact, and then this guy said this guy said that. Well, some of the emails, and I'm going to look through them, well, we don't have any. Do you have any text messages? No, it was just a verbal discussion. Well, it's like it never happened, really.
And email has become so easy. Although this is a personal thing. I like emails better than text. And it's become so easy with sending text back and forth, but it's trying to download them and get them, and you have 100 sheets. Use the emails. I'll just say it makes my life easier.
Text messages have a way of disappearing too after so many days. I'm going to get into a really fun argument here. Hopefully it won't be too bad of an argument. Not available for co-brokerage seems to be something that's growing in our industry, and it kind of grew out of lack of inventory, and I think in the not too distant future that situation will change. Our economy's changing. I'll go to you first, Andy, because we didn't have a pre-meeting, so it'll be interesting. I know what these guys think, and I'm going to get to them as well. I'm going to go to you first. What is your take on guys offering boats not available for co-brokerage? I'm going to take that back a second. New boats, trade-in boats, I think we all agree there are situations where you have to do it. Maybe there's no profit in it. No commission, that you're just trying to sell a boat. But we're talking about something that somebody signed a central listing agreement and you're not making it available for co-brokerage.
I've always, we talked about this at the East Coast Summit, and I've always been against that. And I would rather have the price of the boat, the ask, be a few dollars higher and open it up to the community, because what you're doing is you're maximizing the exposure, you're minimizing the time on market, and as we know, I've made my living, making...
Most people recognize me by my voice.
...make this much, and from a personal standpoint for my company, but also for the industry itself. We're all members of this organization, and for somebody to sit in here and say it's just not available for co-brokerage, then get out of the IYBA. It's that black and white for me. And it comes around. I always, when I know that I have a boat, I tell the community of guys or girls that I deal with regularly, I make sure I'm very open. They know about it right away, and I get my product out there to the community as quick as I can. When we used to buy, when I was with Westport, we would buy trades, and even then, we covered that 5% to pay the outside broker, pack that into the number, because you need the community to sell it. You end up getting more money, you end up creating more long-term relationships, You know, like Jimmy and I, when we get on the phone with each other, I feel like he's my brother. You know, we can talk, we talk about everything, and no, it's true. We have but you know, it's one of these things that, you know, we've created this. We made the decision many years ago to talk about boats that we have coming to market, to do things. We're on the opposite coast, but, you know, try to do that with as many people as you can, and then before you know it, people are going to be calling you up going, you know, I've got this boat coming to market and I think you might be a good guy to sell it. It's good for the whole brokerage community, I think, and also it mostly benefits, the person that benefits the most is your seller.
So I often wonder too, the guys that are advertising things not available for co-brokerage, do their clients know? Is the question, right? We don't have an answer to that, but my guess is they probably don't, and they probably wouldn't be happy about it. Jimmy?
Yeah, I think that there's a little delineation there that you see when you look at, you know, more established, you know, larger yacht brokerage firms, or like let's take Andy for instance. You know, you would never think of seeing not available for co-brokerage with you. But you see some other companies that maybe they're more new boat sales oriented, and we all know who they are, it's fine, it's not a big deal, and they have a brokerage division. They're more likely, because they don't live in that brokerage world and don't have the relationships, most of those people aren't here, you know, they're not in this IYBA community. I think those are the largest group of people that do that because they don't have the relationship with the larger yacht brokerage community. And it's not that they're greedy or they're just trying to hold it as tight as they can and sell it. It's just, I don't think they are aware or know or have a generalized awareness of the benefits of working with the community at large. And I think that we could do a better job with a lot of those people going forward to try to say, hey, you know, open it up. And if you sign a listing agreement with someone else for 5% or 6% and they don't know how to properly purvey to their client the benefits of starting out with a full commission on a listing agreement, that's okay. But why put it not available for co-brokerage? Just, if somebody calls, just tell them. Disclose, like, hey, it's a 5%. I mean, it's so many times that happens, like, okay. But if that's the only boat on the market and I'm only going to get a couple points and it's servicing my client, I'm going to sell them the boat. You know, and I make a short commission. Am I particularly enthused about it? No.
Zero. Never put. Never put your commission in front of a deal, right? It's you know, we get put in that situation from time to time, but you're doing right for your customer and not your financial interest. And the other thing, the bigger the boats get, the harder the hustle, right? So you have to work harder. The bigger the boats are, the more you need the brokerage community, right? Because by the time somebody gets up to the 100-foot range, they've already established a relationship with somebody, you know, and so you're really working. And I tell people, like, boat shows, you know, people ask about Miami Boat Show, or should we put the boat in Miami? And I always tell them, I'm not there really looking for a guy to walk down the dock. I'm looking for the brokers, and any broker that's worth his salt is going to show up to Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Any broker that has a relationship, so really I put boats in shows to sell to all you guys, right? Because you have the people. So that's the mentality of that. But
Shane, I feel like when a guy does this not available thing, there's even an acronym for it, like on the EBO website, NAFCB or whatever. And I'm like, what the heck is NAFCB? It's so common now that you have an acronym for it. But you're trying to sell the boat by yourself instead of using the community, right? So are you any better than a FSBO? I mean, can he just do
It's so funny. I have one broker that's, you know, only 2 years in the business. He's a hustler, and he's crossing over from being a mechanic, and he's got a good business. He works so hard to get these listings. Like, well, I don't want to make it available for it. But listen, man, the job is to sell the boat. First and foremost, the guy signed up. If a guy calls on the boat and he's got a buyer, take the deal. You know, I've hammered it in his head, and he's like, wow, you know, it's a $500,000 boat, you know, it's $50,000 commission. He wants it all. And I'm like, listen, this is a long-term business. It's about the relationships, the people. Definitely the high tide raises all ships. I've sat in Andy's office, you know, I'm not a mega yacht broker, but anytime I get a chance to sit down with somebody and learn from them, I think that's the value of this community.
And he has a really nice conference table.
He does. And I think he's an art connoisseur. I think he knows something about art.
One question I'd give you real quick is, what was the genesis of not available for co-brokerage? I've been doing this for 14 years, and I thought about that after our Zoom call. I was like, why is that even a selectable option to put on? Because Yacht, you can only be a broker to put it on, right?
Right. It was originally supposed to be for trades and new boats.
Yeah.
And long time ago, we were pushing for 95% of your boats had to be available for co-brokerage with Yacht because they were the only ones back then. And they made a statement where it would have to be 50%. If it's on the system, 50%. But within 6 months, it was going to go to 75, and within 6 months after that, it was going to go to 95. But it never changed. It's still on the books of being 50%. So, and the guys that mark everything not available is probably something that should be pointed out to them.
I think it's a moot point. I mean, statistically, we sell about 74%. We get both sides. Now, maybe it's because we sell a lot of boats under $500,000, but I don't even worry about it.
I mean, I'm thinking that it's going to take care of itself, right? Because as the economy slows down, people get more listings. Their listing's not selling because it's only that one guy trying to sell it. He's going to have to make it available. And so I think the angst that we get and all the phone calls we get and all the complaints we get about NAFCB, see, I even know the acronym, I think it's going to go away. I hope I'm right on that. I definitely hope I'm right on that. We're almost running out of time. We wanted to leave some, we have a free attorney up here. We wanted to leave some questions for full disclosure, but we avoided to talk about, and I wanted to get on the kickback thing. I know on the East Coast, they were saying that if you get money for financing or anything like that, and your client doesn't know, it's actually illegal. Is that true, Mike?
Well,
if it's not on the closing statement?
under the Shipbrokers Act, everything's supposed to come through your trust accounts and such, and so that's part of it. There's that fine line between referrals, finder's fees, and kickbacks. And boy, there's a discussion right there. My 10 seconds on finder's fees, I remember a captain who said I promised a finder's fee and he wanted to go after someone, and I hadn't been doing this for a while, so I called a couple of brokers and said, hey, do y'all pay finder's fees? And I was, sure, Mike, you got somebody? No. I called the second one. Sure, Mike, you got somebody? At the third time, I found a pattern forming, and that's when I learned about, finder's fees and such. Probably the main thing is that is where it starts getting this disclosure. Where a kickback is where it's received and it's either confidential or some sort of coercion. Think of city contracts and governments and things like that, where it makes the newspapers and such. But where you also see it, at least I've seen it more, not necessarily on the sales side, but also we're taking a boat to a yard, and then the captain's getting money back, or one of the yards said, one of the captains said, yeah, and I got this really nice watch for bringing the boat there. It's actually nicer than this one, and that becomes the thing. That you can't, that becomes illegal. In fact, there's Florida statutes on commercial bribes, where if someone's receiving or solicits or accepts a benefit with the intent to violate a statutory or common law duty, and that's where it really comes up. And it applies to all agents, applies to lawyers. And someone's, and someone who's an agent, and you're an agent or a professional advisor, and if a kickback's involved, and it's something that's either unknown, and sometimes unknown and such, it can be a third-degree felony. Now, it depends how much, someone's upset about it. Of interest, there's a case that was filed in July down in the Southern District, and the plaintiffs, not Commerce Capital, Canyon Capital, the people who, they buy a lot of boats and they turn a lot of salvage boats. They took it to a yard, and the people who were taking it to the yard were getting kickbacks from, and there's a whole slew of claims against them for, basically misrepresentation and such. So it's out there. But we all know about referral fees. We all know about, where captains will bring you somebody. And I will admit it's a very fine line. I think the key is that of disclosure. A lot of owners look at it as, hey, take care of my captain. It's, maybe his severance pay, something along those lines.
Yeah, but Mike, even if you call it something other than a kickback or commission, isn't it still a commission that you're paying that captain?
Oh, and you can't, and also, you can't split commissions with non-brokers. So it becomes
Isn't it somebody that's absolutely representing them and transacting? Isn't the way the law is written, or the code is written for 326, is it's someone that actually acting as a broker, representing, being involved?
But it sure sounds like a broker. It sure sounds like, unauthorized practice of brokering. I forget the exact phrase and such. I've been to Tallahassee a couple of times where we're defending brokers, or the most fun was defending someone who was deemed not moral enough to be a broker, and that's a cocktail party in itself. But where the issues was someone acting as a broker. I think you've seen it. I don't know if it goes on much anymore, but where there used to be people from Tallahassee who'd come down to the boat shows and wander around and, gee, what a wonderful boat, and trying to find out who was acting as a broker, who wasn't one, or out-of-state brokers and such. I don't know how much that still happens now or something.
Paul, can we have an extra 10?
I got a quick question on his finance thing. So if you were running, and let's say you have your own finance department and you're set up directly with the bank or whatever, and you're making a margin, it's just like selling a new boat. You don't disclose the margin on selling a new boat. I'm just wondering, it's not. I mean, just go.
New boats are different though, because that's.
At one time I was set up and we were doing stuff, and yes, you can make 2-3 points on financing, and it's not going through the trust.
The new case would be very entertaining to say there's no more kickbacks, right? No more referral fees. You guys.
I think that would probably help Remax's stock, no?
Actually, you do want to stay away from taking any money, and I caution captains and other brokers, if you refer a big boat into a refit. I've had 2 instances that I've unearthed going through yard bills, and I couldn't get a straight answer about where these 2 $575,000 payments went when I'm going through, and they were paid to the captain that bought the boat to the yard for the refit.
Jeez.
And the yard probably put it on the insurance, if it was an insurance claim, put it on the bill of the insurance company or to the owner.
Well, it was a massive interior, exterior engine rebuild refit. But I was forward, and that's when I got my first, holy cow, there are some big referral fees being paid by yards. So, that, and I had an instance where a surveyor contacted me, and he said, you know what, I just got sucked into a lawsuit because this owner's claiming that I missed a blister issue on this pretty big boat, and I'm really worried about it, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for me. And I thought about it a minute, and I said, well, where did it all start? And he said, well, the captain that was overseeing this, and he went ahead and had the bottom peeled. He did all this work, and that's where it started. And the captain's the one that has the owner very angry about it. And I said, you know what you do? I said, you have your attorney request from the captain how much money he's been paid by that yard, and it went away.
Wow.
But the thing is, when something goes wrong and you're in the food chain, and that's why I never take referral fees or kickbacks, because you don't want it to be unearthed. I don't want to be in a deposition and all of a sudden, well, Andy, you were paid X number of dollars. It's just bad. It's bad money. It's not representing your client. That automatically says, I'm not interested in saving you the money. And I always tell people, listen, I made my money on the commission when the boat deal happens. We get paid one time, and then we're kind of married to the client for their ownership. And that's really the way it should be, and it works out great, because that guarantees you're ethical, and you'll get that business.
It seems like it goes past ethics and starts approaching to illegal too as well. So anything approaching illegal is definitely going to be unethical, but it's certainly unethical for sure.
And bringing it around to where we started at the beginning, it may be in the eyes of the customer or something what is material, what is ethical, and if it's disclosed to them, or some of them will say, take care of my, I've heard cases where someone says, take care of my captain or something like that. Almost using it as if it was the severance pay or a tip for them, or they won't have to pay.
But in most circumstances, the captain
most of the time
hasn't said it.
Yeah, exactly. And is it to the best interest of the customer? And I think that's where it comes to. Again, you have that fiduciary duty to a customer. Is this jacking up the price? Is this, something, I use the Yacht example, which is probably where I see more, where there seems to be more litigation about it or more problems, where are you doing this for me because this is the best yard, or are you doing it because, hey, I'm getting something in return? That's where that line gets real fuzzy.
The last thing I want to, before we open up for one more quick, and I'm going to give you the mic, and we don't really have time to discuss it around the table, so I'll just go to you. Back when we had the buck system, and you had to get on and you paid by the minute, and you printed out a spec sheet and you sent it to a client, it was pretty easy to prove procuring cause. In this day and age with data everywhere, everybody's got the same data we do practically, with a few exceptions. Is procuring cause a dead issue in our industry now?
I think it's getting tougher because there needs to be that continuous contact. Not just I'm standing in front of the dock and some guy walks up and he wants to go on your boat. Hey, come with me. I'll take you to a boat. Hey, I bought this guy. Thanks. Where's my cut? I think because of the internet, because of advertising, because of that, it's harder to show who found it. So unless that someone seeking that procuring cause can show, I had regular contact, continuing contact, I helped put the deal together, I think it's getting harder and harder to prove it, as opposed to...
So it's harder to prove, but if you know another broker brought you to the boat and then the guy goes around him and calls you directly, it's probably unethical to take that guy because the other guy brought that client to you.
And if you want to, if you ever want to work in this business again, it may work for that one, but the world is rounded, and there may be. Are you sure it's not that? 50. I
mean, it seems to be happening more and more.
There may be up to 1,700 brokers or something in members, but it's still a small community, and people find out fairly fast, who they can deal with and who they.
And just because a client tries that doesn't mean you have to accept that, right? You need to go back to your broker and ask those questions. So,
Is that kind of like 10% should be industry standard, not 5? If I got the listing, it's 1.6 million.
Yeah. It's a big commission. 3%. We're going to open it up for questions real quick. We're sorry we're going long here.
Anybody have a question?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just commenting, and I use more YABA forms being from New England than I do EBA forms. We have a material damage disclosure that we make our sellers sign when they get a listing agreement, stating that the boat hasn't grounded, fire, sinking, collision, whatever. Does that solve the problem we were discussing earlier?
I think it certainly helps. I mean, I don't know of any black and white, yes, this solves the problem, but the more that, one, the buyer can see its history, and then again, the more it insulates you, the broker, that I have made reasonable inquiries and I have checked into it, and this is what the buyer has told me, and see it's on paper. So if you didn't tell me that 2 years ago it sank, or something like that, you've at least covered it. You've covered your sins.
You have to be careful with that too, because it's only what that seller knows. Maybe the boat's 10 years old, he only knows 2 years history. A broker on the East Coast seminar mentioned that he listed a boat, had it all written up, took pictures of it, a really nice boat, and then he found out through some research that 2 clients prior, I should say, the boat sunk. It was on the bottom for quite a while. And he ended up having to drop the listing because the seller didn't want him to disclose that, because the seller didn't even know.
And he did absolutely the right and the most difficult thing. But it speaks to whatever the language is in the contract, in the listing agreement, is specifically where you have cover or you do not. And that was something that was significantly contemplated when we wrote the EBA agreements and the disclosures portion of that agreement.
My question would be for thanks. My question would be for the fiduciary obligation that you have when you take on a new client and you have the not available for co-brokerage on there. Is that something that can come back and bite you if you've got a seller that is like, hey, I've missed the market, and now everything is selling for $100,000 less than it was, and it's your fault because you didn't have it available for co-brokerage, et cetera, and you see where that could potentially put you in a sticky wicket?
I guess the question comes back to that of disclosure. Does he know you have put this on the market for no co-broker? And I think if he knows that, I think you're covered. If he immediately claims, hey, I didn't know, and there's a whole sea of brokers out there who have buyers who could have sold it, that may cause a little bit of trouble. I don't have a black and white answer, but I do know, if he knew it, his case is very, very, almost impossible.
If you gave him a central listing agreement from EBA, you're definitely having known violations of that contract, because that contract says where you're going to put the boat out, and you're not saying, if you're not telling the client, at the very least you're violating the contract. So
You'd have to sign an amendment. I mean, if you want to try to cover yourself, sign an amendment, say not available for co-brokers for 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is your plan is, and I guess sell him on why that is best for him. Taking half of the brokers. Yeah, right. I don't think either. There's a whole lot of brokers who are going to help you sell this boat, and I think you said, 100% of zero is zero. So
I think a lot of the crux of it is explaining properly to your client who say, oh, no, I'm not going to pay more than 5%. Like, why would you do that? Like, take a look at the big picture. What are you trying to do? If you're trying to sell a $5 million yacht and you're looking at either paying $300,000 or $500,000, what's your carry cost to your captain, mate, stewardess? What's your carry cost with docket? Let's add that all up. Why are you messing around with a relatively small sum trying to go after the brokers? Let us do our job and get your boat sold. It's your decision at the end of the day what net you take. You can choose not to take it. But give us a shot to give it the best possible chance I can to get it sold.
That's what whenever they tell me, well, let's ask $5 million or $4,995 or whatever, and I only want to pay 5%. I say, let's ask $5,295. We're gonna get ahead of it. And I agree. If I have to raise the price, I said, what do you imagine you wanted in net? Let's just put a little bit more on that and service you the best we can and get rid of the boat as quick as we can, because that's really what it's all about. You have to make it their idea that you envision yourself walking over this amount of money. Let me go do my job.
Alex isn't here today, Alex Rowe in our office, but his comeback to that is always, if I told you okay on that, you would probably look at me and say I'm not a very good salesman. And let me explain to you, like Jimmy said.
Great. That is good.
You need me representing you because I wouldn't take it sitting down. So it's another way to do it.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Jim Hayek with Passion Yacht Sales. I got a question for you. I had a client, it's about a $400,000 boat. The captain came to me and said, look, we'll give you the listing, but I want half your commission, which is 2.5%. So what's the best way to handle that with regards to disclosure? I want to do things right. I want to sell boats. That's pretty much where I'm at. But, I kind of felt like, well, this doesn't seem right, with that. What's the best advice with regards to that?
Ask him to show a copy of his broker's license.
yeah, I was going to say that. And one, you just can't. Yep. I mean, and even if you did it, he may be buying a lawsuit. And also, does the owner know, the buyer know, whoever's working with his client?
Was an attorney, so a larger attorney in our market and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of a gray area to it. I didn't take the listing, so I ended up, walking away from it. But it was just something that when you brought it up to me, I was like, kind of looked at it like, come on, bro.
Yeah, so it's one of those, and I realize what's the phrase, well, we now have a moral dilemma, do I want to take this or not? But you could be buying problems. And at the end of the day, you want to sell boats and be done with it and see them at, the bar with a drink in your hand, not across the bar with the judge on the other side.
Yeah, and I know they have a question there, but that's kind of the crux of my question earlier, is that just because you say, I'm going to pay this captain's lunch bill at $15,000 doesn't make it legal. You call it something else, it's still a kickback. So.
Yeah. Hey, gentlemen, Mike Mollinger, Pier 1 Yacht Sales. Legal question I've got a few opinions on. At what moment does the ownership actually transfer from seller to buyer? What is the actual moment that ownership actually transfers?
Well, it depends whose side you're on, I guess.
We deal with that in our office a lot, because everybody, people sometimes are real reluctant to sign everything in escrow, right? Sign out, because you have escrow money, but you also have paperwork in escrow, right? But for me, and I'm saying this before, Mike, to make sure I'm correct on this, for me, once the paperwork's signed, we hold an escrow, we get authority now from the buyer of the boat to go ahead and fund the seller. Once the seller has funds in his account, that boat is closed.
Amen.
An email from the seller stating that I have received the funds in full, and that's whenever the boat, in my mind.
Mr. Allen has a
Not according to Mr. Allen.
Hang on a second.
Sorry, we're out of time. I'm deferring to a higher
What
authority.
happens when you wear a long sleeve shirt?
Hey, Paul, would you hold my briefcase? Who does that briefcase belong to right now?
Possession is 9/10 of the law.
No, possession is the law. If I want to get that back from you, keep holding it.
Your money in here.
If I want to get it back from you, if I punch you in the face and take it, it's an assault. If I grab it out of your hands, it's an assault. A boat is a thing. It's not real estate where transfer happens of record. The moment possession transfers is when ownership transfers. That's why you got to be really careful. And even if the contract says title transfers when the money hits, guess what? Under the law, that's not an enforceable provision. That's why when we deal with big yachts, we have these things called protocols of delivery and acceptance. And that's a little piece of paper that the representative of the seller and the buyer sign that says, hey, at this moment, possession transferred. And you don't sign it. You don't sign it until the money's in the account. So what Michael said earlier is somewhat correct. It depends on what side you're on, because we fight about it all the time. We had a fight on a Gary Smith deal once that we ended up resolving when the deal closed. But remember, title transfers upon possession. Okay, so be very careful about delivering possession.
What defines possession? I paid for the slip, I paid for the insurance. Do I have to physically move the boat, start the boat? What is possession?
Now, possession, that's an interesting question as well, because under some law, possession occurs when you actually move the boat. If the contract says delivery will occur offshore, 10 miles offshore, or if that's when you need these protocols of delivery and acceptance. But if it says that delivery is going to occur at the dock, you got to be careful. It's better not to let the other captain on, not to let the buyer on until the money is in your account. So just be careful. Possession is when title transfers.
And just so you guys know, most guys at the legislature are attorneys. And they write laws like this, so they can come back and fight about it for years and years and years and make lots of money. So it pays the bill. They keep it vague on purpose, right, Bob? You agree with that?
I just say, representing a seller a couple of years, or a while back, who the boat was sold, money changed hands, and like almost late that afternoon, or practically the guy said, oh, now I don't want it, or something along those lines. Money had already gone into trust, all that, and it went to a AAA arbitration, which in itself is not always as much fun, has to money to transfer. And there was no clear protocol of delivery, but everything was signed on the, the other were on the deck of the boat, everything was signed, everything was good, congratulations, here are the keys, have a nice life. And then he changed his mind. And money had gone into the seller's trust account, or broker's trust account, lawyer's trust account. But still hadn't that afternoon or something, hadn't made you change it or something, but the money transferred. And it came after several months and several lawyer's fees. They said, no, it transferred. But it's hard, what Bob had said, defining, here's the protocol of acceptance, here's when it happened. At 12 noon, today, it's your boat. Take it off the dock, something where you can say, a clear line. Otherwise, you may be employing a lot of lawyers, which is...
You're going to have Garrett?
Yes.
All the mics from the stage, so I'll grab one from somebody.
I'm going to stop you right there.
I think it helps, but I'm going to defer to a higher authority.
The answer is the law says that is ineffective. We tried to do it. The law, under the Uniform Commercial Code, makes that ineffective.
Gonna have to.
And if you get two lawyers in there, but I think it helps. I think once you start stacking proof on one side, you know, someone is, the other side may have taken possession, all right, and if you can say, and he signed the papers, and the money transferred, and he took possession, you know, it's kind of, you know, doing that scales of justice. So the more you put on both sides,
We affectionately call this a rabbit hole.
yes, we've gone down a
That's not much to do there with ethics and kickbacks, but I'm sorry we ran late, guys. We were really
Paul, do you want us to stop
for the day, so.
Yeah, you guys gotta come.
We gotta get out of here. Good.
Gary, would you please give your lavalier quickly so Gary can come up? Thanks.